So we're going to talk a little bit about the sea vegetables that Paul so nicely introduced to you and some of the experiments that we've been working with. And so I've been working with the sea vegetables now for, I think, Ikuko and I for about 3 years now, about that much time. But at Harbor Branch, we've been working with the Halophyte, I think it was about more like 7 years in the system. This was a presentation that I gave at the World Aquaculture meeting in San Diego in March, and so it gives you, we like to get out into the aquaculture world and talk about what we're doing. So Paul already went through the IMTA system with you, but I also want to acknowledge the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute Foundation. They're the ones that manage the license plate. So if you see the license plate with the clownfish on it, that license plate, the proceeds from that help to support the integrated multi-trophic aquaculture system. And specifically for today, we're talking about the sea vegetable part. And so Paul introduced you to the different various components, and we are going to focus on the assimilative part of the IMTA system. So our goals are, for the sea vegetable work that we do here at Harbor Branch, is to develop technology that can be transferred to the aquaculture industry. So that's why you all are here today. We're hoping that many of you will learn more about what we're doing and that we can be a provider of technology so that you can take it into a commercial way. So we are here to help make that possible for you. So if you don't get all the information you need today, we'll definitely make sure that we can continue to provide that to you. And so we've been working on production methods and the economics to grow plants, the systems, which you're going to hear a lot about from Ikuko, the labor, the harvest times, the schedules, and then also the market. And although there is quite a substantial market for species such as Salicornia, especially in Europe, it's just starting to pick up really in the United States, but there's such a great opportunity, and we can talk more about that when we talk about the culinary side. And we're looking at helping to develop some production and marketing plans, so we'd like to do that in coordination with industry. And then we're conducting our industry workshop. This is our first industry workshop here. So Paul introduced you to the plants, and this is where they are found in the wild. And so the sea asparagus, they're all coastal plants. They're all native to Florida. And these particular photographs are taken, this one's at one of the Indian River Land Trust sites in Indian River County, not too far from here. This SIBLITE one was found up in Melbourne Beach on the coastal side there in Maritime Hammock. And then this is the sea purslane that's found a lot in the coastal areas and also in the beach areas. And then the saltwort is also found more in salty coastal areas. We also have them here in Harbor Branch, and I think as some of you mentioned that you've seen them up in Cedar Key. So we're very fortunate in Florida to have these great edible plants that grow locally. This is what they do look like in the tanks, and you're going to get to see that today, and also Paul introduced you to that, and those are our common names that we use along with their scientific names. The sea asparagus, and actually Ikuko is going to go more into this, but the sea asparagus produce a seed. They're an annual plant, and so in order to continue to keep planting it, you need to be able to have the seeds. And this is what it looks like when it's in its edible form. This is what it looks like when it goes to seed. There's, using a microscope, there's a little flower, and then the seeds. But Ikuko will take you through more of that. And then also the seedlings, you're going to get to see that in our IMTA system, and Ikuko is also going to go through that in more detail with you. So this is what our system looks like, and this was the first study that we did we started in March of 2020, and this was our first experimental look at substrates. Okay, so, and you have, whoops, go back a second. You have the raft system here, and then you have the substrate systems with sand and clay. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail once again. Ikuko is going to walk you through that. But that was the experimental setup that we looked at. We were looking at 3 of the plants. We looked at Salicornia, we looked at sea purslane, and we looked at saltwort. And it was a 10-week experiment. So the plants were actually harvestable before 10 weeks, but that was the period of time that we used for comparison-wise. And you can already see in this photograph here the difference. This is the clay and sand is on this side, and this is the raft. And you can see a tremendous difference just in the difference between putting them into a substrate type versus having them in a floating raft. So you can see certainly a difference in the coloration of the plants themselves. We did test water quality along the way, and the average at that time of year was 26 degrees Celsius, and that was more in the sort of springtime. The temperature does get a little higher than that. Salinity stayed around 36, but as Paul mentioned, a lot of the salinity is going to be dependent on how much rain there has been during the year. pH is typically 8, but that's the average. It can go a little lower, a little higher. And you can see that there's no ammonia in the system, low nitrate, high nitrates, and then the alkalinity. So what we end up doing to help us understand how well the systems work is we look at the biomass. So we look at how much edible product. So not only the plant itself, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when I show you the culinary side, that there's a part of the plant that's not edible. And so we try to look at the yield, not only on the whole plant, but then we take all the edible portions off, and we weigh that as well. And we had quite the team in May. It took us, I don't know, there must have been maybe 10 of us, I don't know, but we worked all day long because the plants were very large and there was a lot of product that came off. And then we sent them to the laboratory to be analyzed, both from nutritional and also from some of the basic compounds within the plants. So you can see, actually, here's a good example of the edible portion and the non-edible portion of the sea purslane. And yeah, so these were the results of the biomass, and this was the results of the biomass total weight. So this was the entire plant. And then on the bottom there, you can see the percent of edible portion of those plants. So let me walk you through this. So this is your saltwort, and the saltwort you can see did much better in the sand. This is a sea asparagus, and you can see really it did well in all 3 types of systems, both the raft, the clay, and the sand. And then the sea purslane also did well in all 3 systems. So, but you'll see that there was also a color difference, as you can remember from the earlier slide. So then if you look at the edible weight, we get a very large amount of edible weight from the saltwort and also from the sea asparagus. But it's really the sea purslane that has the long stems in it that we only get about 50% of edible weight. And so from that study, the study that we did with substrates, we then went into a seasonal study, and we used sand at that point because we felt sand was one of the better substrates to be able to do the comparison over the season. And so what we did is we had 3 seasons. We had November to February, which was more like the winter season, March to May, more springtime, and then June to August, which was the summer months. And what you can see here is a difference in growth, dramatic difference in growth. The saltwort does really well in the summer. It thrives in the warmer weather. So although they grow year-round, you can see quite a difference. And that was the same with the sea purslane here, although sea purslane did well in the spring and also the summer. And then the sea asparagus also did well in both the spring and the summer.
And this is actually the same results that I just showed you visually, but more on a graph side. I'm just going to skip over this. And then we introduced SIBLITE, which Paul said is definitely his favorite. And I must admit, it's certainly one of my favorites. And he tells me it tastes like broccoli, so we'll see what you think about that. But it is quite an amazing plant. And so Ikuko ran this study. We said, well, let's go ahead and run SIBLITE. We haven't really worked with it before. And you can see what happened over a 10-week period from the planting all the way to 10 weeks. And this is one plant, one single plant that was 1.3 kilograms. So you can see that and you'll see when you go out today how quickly this plant grows. So I think this one they all have high potential. I don't want to be biased because they all have different attributes to them and also edible taste and attributes to them. But we were quite taken by the SIBLITE. And so our next steps is to continue to look at substrates and systems, and we're doing a little bit of that, as you'll see when you go out on the tour today. Ikuko's running quite a bit of studies right now with salinity, and then we continue to want to look at nutritional characteristics because we know that they do have protein, they do have lots of minerals and vitamins. So we want to be able to also look at those over by substrate and also by season. And the harvest frequency. So there is an opportunity, and Ikuko will share more of this with you too, that you can actually harvest the plants but still continue to have growth on them. And that's very typical in the large scale farms that are done in Europe where they harvest a crop and then they get another 2 or 3 crops. And then we had our goal to have a May workshop, and you all are here for that workshop. By the way, this is one of the purslane flowers. And when we go out into the sea vegetable area, if there's any blooming, feel free to pick them and taste them because they have a fragrance taste and also a salty taste. And they're very beautiful, but they only bloom once a day, and they only bloom once, and they bloom around 11 o'clock. In the day, they come out and they stay around for the day. Very pretty. So let's see. So in a little bit, I'll also talk about some of the culinary aspects of working with these edible plants as well. And if any of you follow Instagram, I do post about our sea vegetable work, but also our Queen Conch work at Queen Conch Lab. There's my email address if you have any follow-up questions as well. But I think we have time for some questions.
So in my side of aquaponics, I deal with pests a lot. You guys are outdoors, not under greenhouse, not under any kind of structure. Do you guys have pest pressure?
So the question was, do we have pests? And that's such a great question. And actually, Richard's always finding little caterpillars or eggs on there. So some of the plants are hosts. Like the betas is host to the white.
Southern butterfly.
What's it called?
The white southern butterfly.
The white southern butterfly. So we have to keep an eye on that. And that's probably of all the plants, when you say Ikuko and Richard, of all the plants, probably the betas has had the most amount of predation from the caterpillars.
South California hasn't been bad recently, but in the past I've had the problem with the moth.
About the wasp?
No,
Yeah.
the moths.
The moth. Oh, the moth,
yeah.
exactly. So that's really the issue that we've had, but if we pull them off, and it's not usually like prevalent, so that's one of the beauties of working with the saltwater halophytes is that they are pretty much pest resistant because of their high salinity.
Did you ever try BT to control the caterpillars?
No, we haven't
No.
done anything
No.
to try to control them.
Okay, and does it destroy the plant pretty quickly?
It can. It's not a quick destroy, but you can see definitely some pieces that have been affected. I don't know, Kevin, if you have seen any pests in the work that you do as well? Is it mostly the butterflies and the caterpillars?
We used to have trouble with the caterpillars, when we work in a greenhouse, and so when we had a greenhouse that was, I'll say, leaky, we used to have more trouble with them. But we've had a lot of trouble with thrips, with purslane, which is one of the main crops that we grow. And so when we constructed our larger sea vegetable production area, we used no-seam screening on the building to control that, and that's been keeping it under control. What's the one we've had recently? Oh, some turnip aphids, Tom's had.
Some aphids? Okay.
Yeah.
The aphids, and what was the other one that you mentioned?
Thrips,
Shrimps?
yes.
Okay.
And they're quite common pests.
Okay,
for,
okay.
These plants, but I'm not growing at full strength. I'm growing in brackish waters, so
Okay.
my salinities are right around 15 EBT, and so you may be keeping them
Keeping
down
them at bay,
because you're
so.
up at
Mhm.
that higher salt concentration, but where we're located, if we were outside, I'm sure we'd be inundated.
Okay, so just in case you couldn't hear very well, but Moat's working at 15 parts, and maybe that changes the makeup of the pests that are coming in, but they have used no-seam screen to help to stop some of the pests from coming in, and the greenhouse itself has also been an advantage. Jim or Shirley? Okay, Jim and then Shirley.
Yeah, I'm just curious, between all these 4 species that we've been discussing, are there any that have a particularly higher nitrogen uptake than the others?
Yes, it appears to be the SIBLITE, the Sueda. You'll see how much bigger that is than any of the other plants right now. Shirley.
So I have 2 questions. First, Kevin mentioned this, what's the lowest salinity at which these can be grown? That's the first question. And the second is Cuckoo going to talk about nutritional value?
Okay, so the first question was, what's the lowest salinity? And I'm actually going to leave, Ikuko, are you going to talk about that a little bit? The salinity. Yeah, she's going to pick up on that in her demonstration. So nutrition, we decided not to talk about that, and only because our samples are low right now, so we didn't want to just express that this is the nutritional value of each of these. We'd like to do more replication and send it into the lab to have more replication so we can really feel comfortable talking about the nutrition, but I do want to let you know that, and I could do follow-up with you, that it has some of your basics, good minerals and vitamins in it. And really that's what you're looking for, both in seaweeds and also in these halophyte plants, is they're picking up the nutrition from the salt water, which is very high in all these different minerals. And it's a lot different salt content than your typical table salt. So it's really what we consider, quote, a healthy salt. So we can go into that some more, though. I can definitely do some follow-up with you all. And
Yeah,
Kevin?
I would also say we've done a full nutritional profile on the purslane and have the data on that in our system. Again, you really have to do it in the system you're growing them in because it is an IMTA. So
good point.
you're feeding it with the nutrients from the, in our case, a fish production system. So I think that would change it. But another good piece of information will be coming out soon from Sarah Baker Marshall.
That's right.
Who's doing her doctorate in the food science department at University of Florida, and she has analyzed samples from all of us,
That's right.
as well as from the wild. So there's going to be some really nice data. She's defending in about 2 weeks.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so just to repeat a little bit of what Kevin said is they have their nutritional profile for the sea purslane that's grown at Moat. So I'm sure you can follow up with Kevin on that. And then we both, Moat and Harbor Branch, helps Sarah Baker, who's doing her dissertation at University of Florida, and she's done a complete analysis. So that is going to be exciting to see that. So we'll make sure that we can share that with all of you as it comes out, because you can use that for marketing your product. And you'll see that with Heron Farms, they already market a lot of their products with that kind of information. So it's important for all of us to have that. So it's a great question, a great discussion that we need to follow up on. Over this way. And behind you too,
Oh,
Vincent.
okay,
Yeah.
I was just curious, what's the potential for growing these out? I'm thinking of like a home garden that may not have access to an aquaculture or aquaponic system. What's the potential for growing it in like a traditional garden type setting where you're planting it?
Right. So the question is can this be used in a typical garden situation? And I'd say definitely yes. And it is going to have to be fed with nutrients. And then with the different salinity work that Ikuko's doing and the low salinity that Kevin mentioned, that also has potential. And some plants are going to do better in low salinity than others. So short answer is definitely yes. And I think I can take maybe 2 more questions, and then we need to take a break. And we'll have more discussion as well along this morning.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, are there other commercial farmers currently growing seed vegetables? Is there an association that does marketing for seed vegetables?
Yeah, this is such a great question. So, and this is why we're doing the work, right? So the question was, are there other places where there's growing seed vegetables commercially, and is there someone that can help with the marketing side of it as well? So definitely in Europe, it's a very popular item. It's also used in like poke bowls in Hawaii. So, there's certain niche areas that it's being used, but I would encourage you to look up some of the farms that are in Europe, but also Heron Farms that I mentioned in South Carolina have really taken off on Salicornia specifically. And so I really speak for my colleagues as well, really feel that Florida could be a leading state in this for these products. And so we should talk more about that and think about, and there's plenty of room, like if all of you decided to go into the business, there's plenty of room for everybody. It's a market that's just waiting to happen and to introduce it to people.
Are there chefs in Florida that are currently working with it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Where we are, there are.
Oh, sorry, Kevin.
Because we direct market to chefs.
Yeah, Kevin, we should have Kevin speak a little bit about her aspects of it too. And I apologize for skipping over that. But mostly on the sea purslane side, right? Yeah, so the sea purslane, and that would be great to hear more from you about that. The Salicornia is probably one of the more popular species that can get some of the higher value, because if you look at what Heron Farms is doing, you'll see what kind of value they're getting. And then I think there's a really great opportunity to introduce the SIBLITE and maybe come up with a different name for it too. All right, I can take one more question. Robinson.
Yeah, I have a question. You showed the graph that is some of the plant has 70% that you can eat it, 30% is waste that maybe you can eat it. Is there any study or you have thinking about using that part that is not usable for eating as a super like compost with recycled nutrients?
Yeah, so the question is all about what do you do with the waste from the product. And so if you're selling it, you're probably selling it as a whole plant, and probably Kevin can talk about that too. You're not going to necessarily pick it apart for your customer, unless it's a specialty item. But the question was, could you maybe use it for compost or other purposes? And so there is some, potential there. You'll get to see what some of that stems are like, and what could be done with it. So yeah, that's something to discuss some more. So let's see, it is now 10:20. Let's take a 10-minute break and come back here at 10:30. And then Ikuko's gonna start talking about how you actually start planting and all about the system. And then we'll follow that with the culinary work. Thanks.